Yeah, I spoke to all the next presenters, and everyone's agreed to fast-track their presentations, including VP Dan Cardinal, who's going to be up next. So Dan, if you could make your way up here. I'm going to turn it over now to my co-chair, Brian Fayant. He's going to lead over to the next parts here with the Vice President's report, the Secretary, Carol Ridsdale. If you're available, can you please make your way up here as well? And then they'll get into the Treasurer, Lawrence Gervais' presentation. And then we'll get into the resolution. So I'll ask everybody to be at the ready, because this is going to move pretty fast. And I'm going to turn it over now to Brian. Please extend to him the same considerations you have to me, and thank you so much.
So thank you, Bruce. So Danny just raced right up here, so we're going to ask him to get on with his report. It's quite simple.
Tansi. I have been honored to represent the Métis Nation when requested by President Patra in all social gatherings and events. This has been another challenging year due to COVID. I want you to know that for many of our people, it must seem that we have been in an unending season of hopelessness. I know that for a lot of you, there has been the loss of loved ones, the loss of income, and much loneliness for the loss of human.
So if you guys don't mind, I know you like to have a conversation, but Danny is making his report. And so if you need to have a conversation, can you take it out in the hall, please? There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Tapwe kiampik, ndohtamok tansumakawi. I know that for a lot of you, there has been the loss of loved ones, the loss of income, and much loneliness from the loss of human connection, which I am sure is both overwhelming and challenging under these circumstances. We have worked hard to continue to provide supports and create new programs to help Métis Albertans through this trying time. As Provincial Vice President, I have reached out to many Métis Nation citizens in all our regions to make them aware of the programs available to assist them. In addition, I have attended many meetings with the boards I am part of, including Métis Crossing Experience Company, Edmonton Food Bank, Métis Child and Family Services, and the Fundraising Committee for the Sacred Heart of the First Peoples Church. In 2020, our Métis Crossing Board approved the construction of a 40-room lodge. It is now open and accepting reservations. The lodge is a boutique style and has a bistro. We are looking forward to hosting a grand opening in the near future for the lodge and gathering center, both delayed due to COVID closures. At this moment, I'd like to stop because I have stated that I was a part of Sacred Heart Fundraising Committee because, as a lot of you are aware, the church had a fire and we had to raise money for the renovations, which have been done. And when we had the papal visit, there was a private mass there for leaders, chiefs, ministers, and there was approximately 400 parishioners that were there. I am a parishioner of that Sacred Heart Church. And I also was at the papal visit in Lac Saint Anne. And I was honored to be able to do the prayer in Cree and to also do the rosary in Cree. So meeting the Pope has been quite an honor for myself. In Batoche on September 2nd, 2021, many of our finest singers and fiddlers performed for Alberta Day at the Fall Gathering. The performances were great. On October 21st to the 24th, 2021, I attended the Michif Language Conference near Medicine Hat. I also participated in Métis Week activities in Lac La Biche and St. Albert. I attended 2 Region 3 business mixers in Calgary on March 5th and 6th. I attended the Residential School Survivors Gathering in Edmonton. Listening to their stories was very painful, but it was a necessary step in preparing our delegates to tell their stories to Pope Francis at the Vatican. We are aware that this is just a very small step on the journey to reconciliation. I attended the annual general meeting for many of our locals, Local 1904 in St. Albert on March 21st, Local 845 in Rocky Mountain House on March 25th, Local 492 in Red Deer on March 26th. On May long weekend, I attended the St. Albert Matey Festival organized by Matey Child and Family Services. May 27th, I attended Matey Festival in Fort McMurray, organized by Local 1935. At that time, I was honored to do the morning prayer in Cree at Our Lady of the Three Rivers School in Fort McMurray. This spring, Provincial Council also approved unanimously the adoption of a pride flag as a mark of inclusiveness for all our Métis citizens. A special meeting took place on June 4th in Grand Prairie, which approved the postponing of our elections until September 2023. So the work on our Constitution can continue. On June 8th to the 11th, I attended the Hills Are Alive celebration at the Eagles Nest Ranch near Medicine Hat. It was wonderful. So my hat goes off to the president of Medicine Hat, Jeanette Hansen. This was a very enjoyable weekend of fiddle, music, and Métis crafts. I am looking forward to spending more time working for and visiting with our Métis citizens in the coming year. Merci. Nimieten manaka kyokawa pamte, kapik swate kumakane hiawean, wamina kawita mat nawao, tahtugisgaun duatoskan, utenak, kayo makapamuhtean. Maga, nimieten minaka kyoewa pamte, mersin de tuan, exumaga.
Chaska. Is there any questions for Dan? Going once, going twice, going three times. If there's no, oh, there's a young lady walking up there. Oh, she's not walking up there. If there's no questions for Dan, I'm looking for a motion to accept Vice President's report. Oh, there's a number 4. Number 4.
Yeah. Rick Boucher, Region 1, I'd make a motion to accept Vice President Dan Cartnell's report.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Daniel.
Boucher. And I need a seconder.
Region 2, I second this motion.
Say your name again, that was kind of muffled.
Brenda Eustitian, Region 2.
Thank you. Thank you. So I need, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Seeing none. Any abstentions? I don't see any. All righty. Oh, there's, oh, no, I guess not. Okay, thank you very much. That motion's carried. Okay, so we want to introduce you to Carol Ridsdale. She's going to be reading the summary of motions from last year's assembly. And once that's done, you may ask questions, and we'll then ask for a motion. Go ahead, Carol.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the elders for being here today to provide the prayers and the guidance. And I really am grateful for this weekend and how we've moved forward. So thank you all. The minutes of the Métis Nation of Alberta 93rd Annual General Meeting held on August 21st, 2021 at the Métis Crossing Cultural Gathering Centre in Smoky Lake, Alberta. Motion 1. Brian Hamblin moved that we elect 2 chair positions using the highest number of votes as the chair and the second highest as co-chair. If there are more than 3 nominees, we have a secret ballot. Seconded by Graham Andrews. Motion defeated. Motion number 2. Graham Andrews moves to cease nominations for chair. Seconded by Andrea Sandmeyer. Motion carried. Motion number 3. Brian Hamlin moves to cease nominations for vice chair. Seconded by Melanie Ominio. Motion carried. Motion number 4. Aaron Barner moved to adopt the agenda as presented. Seconded by Marilyn Dumont. Motion carried. Motion number 5, Andrew Carrere moves to accept the President's report, seconded by Louis Belrose. Motion carried. Motion number 6, Lawrence Gervais moves to accept the President's report, seconded by Carol Ridsdale. Motion carried. Motion number 7, Dusty Gaucher moves to accept the Secretary's report, seconded by Angie Carrere. Motion carried. Motion number 8, Dusty Gaucher moves to adopt the minutes from the 2019 AGA, seconded by Marilyn Dumont. Motion carried unanimous. Motion number 9, Dusty Gaucher moves to accept the March 31st, 2020 Treasurer's Report, seconded by Brian Hamlin. Motion carried. Motion number 10, James Atkinson moves to accept the March 31st, 2021 Treasurer's Report, seconded by Dusty Gaucher. Motion carried.
There we go. Thank you very much, Carol. So, any questions for Carol? Oh, there's number 2. Go ahead.
Jeanette Hansen, Region 3. Under motion numbers 5 and 6, it both says President's Report. Is one of them the Vice President?
Yeah, motion number 6, sorry, that would be a typo. It would be Vice President's report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So with that error corrected, any other questions? Our secretary got that, I guess. Any other questions for Carol? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Since there's no further questions, can I have a motion to accept the minutes of last year?
With correction?
Pardon me? With the correction? Yes, with the correction. Of this report, please. Oh, number 1. State your name, please.
Gail McClanagan, I accept the,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
move to accept this report.
yes.
All right.
Exactly.
I need a seconder.
He
Oh,
reached,
number 3, please. Go ahead.
Sharon Leahy, Region 3, I second it.
Second. Thank you. All in favor of the report, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Since there's no, well, any abstentions? Since there's no abstentions and no oppositions, your motion has been carried, your report is accepted. Thank you so much. We need the treasurer. Treasurer Lawrence Gervais. Is Mr. Gervais here? Oh, of course, Ruben. And Ruben, the accountant. Oh, sure.
Where do you want me to go? Do you want me to go
Yeah,
here?
did you want to sit up or you want to sit here?
Oh, sure, I'll just sit down if
move
that's
over
okay.
there. You guys do the reports. Take my cookie.
Well, why don't you sit here? We'll just sit there.
Is there enough there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go here. It's okay, no big deal.
All the money guys were here. I thought I better move. Just kidding. So, okay, this young fella is no stranger to the people, to the Métis Nation, Mr. Ruben. If you want to do that, so introduce yourself, tell them a bit about yourself, and then what the report is. Oh, okay. There you go. You, Mr. Treasurer, goes first. Thank you.
No, I want to thank everybody for having the energy to stick here, and we look forward to certainly the Ruben's report today. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Lawrence Gervais. I'm the treasurer for the Métis Nation of Alberta, and we look for more discussion and certainly open up the floor for questions when Ruben is finished. And want to thank everybody for a wonderful year. This is a very thick document. And as you can see, the tremendous growth that you can see Métis Nation of Alberta is currently experiencing. So I just want to thank everybody for being here.
Thank you, Lawrence. Just as a quick introduction, my name's Ruben Jeffrey. I've been the auditor. My firm is Kingston Ross Pasnock. I've been the auditor for 20-some years now. I'm not sure exactly how many. I was younger and skinnier when I started. Anyways, first thing I... Sorry?
He was.
Yeah, I was. I know. It's sad.
So was I.
Yeah, we all were.
Anyway, sorry.
First thing I want to do is I just want to say hi. I want to thank everyone. As you can see, the financial statements are a huge booklet. It's a huge culmination to get them done. You know, 130 pages, 140 pages, so there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's not just me. I've got a team at my office that works on it, and then also the team at the Matey Nation, the Finance Committee, the Provincial Council. Everyone really works at this to ensure that it's a good document. So my analysis is a quick analysis of the financial statements for the March 31st, 2022 fiscal year end, going back to the 2018 one. And I'm just going to look for the young fellow who's going to switch slides. Okay. Okay. So right off the start, our first slide is a 5-year comparison of the total revenue for the Métis Nation. The total revenue for the year, as you can see on the slide, is over $83 million in comparison to the revenue for 2021, which was $81.279 million. Métis Nation of Alberta's total revenue has increased by approximately $1.762 million compared to last year, which isn't a huge rise, but if you take a look at it going back to 2018, when the revenue was $11.5 million, that's a huge increase. This slide is a comparison of the total revenue for that has been received for the Métis Nation by program, okay, and illustrating the biggest programs. And so as you can see on here, the biggest category is there's about $24.094 million, which is made up of 78 smaller departments in the Métis Nation, all right? Like, this is one of the reasons why the document is so thick, is because there's so many departments that make up the smaller areas. The biggest department this year is a housing department, and the total revenue in this fiscal year is $12.275 million. The second biggest department in the year is the COVID-19 pandemic response, and the total funding in this department, as you can see on the slide, is $12,079,000. Post-secondary is the third largest at $10.65 million. The governance department is the next largest, and this is at $9.216 million. And just for comparison purposes, if we take a look at that compared to the March 31st, 2018 total revenue that was on our last slide, all of those departments in themselves are almost bigger than the total revenue for March 31st, 2018. The next one is the Early Learning and Child Services Department. This is the 5th largest department, and it's got a total funding of $7.8 million. This graph is a comparison of the total expenditures incurred by the Métis Nation of Alberta over the past 5 years. This corresponds very closely with the first slide, which was a 5-year analysis of revenues. The total expenditures are approximately $274,000 lower than the 2021 figures. This slide is a breakdown of the total expenditures for the March 31st, 2022 fiscal year by 3 categories. We have in here program costs, which is $69.5 million. We have also in this, we have travel costs and wages. Next slide. This graph is the operating surplus of the Métis Nation of Alberta that it has experienced over the last 5 years. The organization experienced an operating surplus in the current year of $4.158 million. The Métis Nation of Alberta began with the fiscal year with an overall operating surplus of $9.816 million, and with the current year's surplus, the new operating surplus at the end of the year was $13.975 million. Now we have 5 slides which present the operational surplus and deficit for certain programs over the last 5 years. The first one in the series is core operations. As you can see, the revenue exceeded the expenditures by $4.195 million in the current year. This is where the Métis Nation of Alberta's overall surplus occurred. Next, we have the Framework Department. This slide indicates that the Framework Department experienced a net of 0 for the year, no deficit or surplus. Total funding for this year and total expenditures for the year match, and they were the same for last year and every year except for 2020. Flip the page. This is the Governance Department. As you can see, the total revenue for this year is $9.216 million, which is an increase of about $1.6 million from the past year. There's no surplus in this department. This slide is a 5-year comparison of the total salaries and benefits. As you can see, the total salaries for the March 31st, 2022 fiscal year are $8.8 million, and that's compared to 2021's year, where the total salaries were $8.035 million. This graph is a summary of the amount that's spent on travel per year. So as you can see, in the current fiscal year, there's $488,000 spent on travel, which is a little bit higher than 2021, but significantly lower than 2020 and 2019. Of course, the pandemic played a huge part of this. Okay. This is an interesting slide. This slide is a summary of the sources of the revenue, broken down by federal, provincial, and other funding agencies. You can see that 95% of the current year's funding was received from the federal government, 4% from the provincial, and 1% is from other organizations. One more slide. This graph illustrates the 3-year comparison of the total revenue received by the Métis Nation of Alberta, funds utilized during the year to support various programs, initiatives, and amounts of funding deferred into the next year. The 2022 contributions received in the amount of funding arrangements for $100 million, 103,294 to be exact, and there's an amount of $83,000 and $42,000 that has been used to support programs throughout the year, and there's $88,106,000 of funding that's been received that has been deferred to the next fiscal year. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ruben. Is there anything you want to say about that? You good? Okay, so then I just checking with Mr. Jarvis here, make sure I am not missing stuff on the report. If you have any questions for the finance auditor and the finance people, now is your time. Going once. Oh, there's a hand going up and a person running there, and there's 2. We're good. We're good. We got people. I got 3. Yeah, we're good. We'll go with number 3. I think you beat me there, didn't you?
Melanie Omenhio, Region 4. Good afternoon, Ruben.
Hi.
So thank you for your finance report. I just have a couple of questions that probably aren't covered in your slides. One of them is, Ruben, there's a number of corporations that belong to the Métis Nation of Alberta that are no longer being ever reported to here at our assemblies. And it's not that I need to do operational day-to-day, but are you the auditor for those corporations?
I'm the auditor for many of the corporations that the Métis Nation of Alberta owns. And in fact, there's disclosure in the detailed financial statements for most of them. I believe the only one that I'm not the auditor of is Apitogason.
So I have a question that maybe then you can answer.
Okay.
I want to know, because as we heard through the President and the Vice President's report, they sit on very often I know the president does as ex officio, but some of the board members sit on a variety of these various outside organizations, especially the executive. Are there remuneration being paid to our provincial council that's not being disclosed within these financial statements and maybe should be? Because even though it's money coming from another corporation, it is them receiving additional remuneration for their role being elected as our officials.
That's a good question. I'm not actually sure off the top of my head. I mean, for the corporations that I'm the auditor of, I can certainly go back and take a look at those. You know, and I can ask the question of the auditor of the organizations that I'm not the auditor of. So if you want, you know, probably it's best, you know, just to communicate with myself and the head office, and then we can get back to you on that. Okay.
Thank you, Mel. Number 1.
Hi, I'm Shelley Benz, Vice President, Matey Local 845 in Rocky Mountain House. How do we find out how many corporations we own? Is there a number, a specific number? Do we own 15, 20, 10, 2?
Well, actually, in the financial statements on page, just let me find the page. On page 10 and 11, it lists them. It lists all the names of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we, let me think about this. I think this is the problem with getting this financial statement 5 minutes before we're supposed to ask questions about it. Maybe we could get this a month early. Maybe we could get it so that we can actually look through it, because just to scan through it is pretty difficult. And there's a lot of stuff in here to try to digest. And so for me to vote to say, yes, I accept this financial statement without really having any knowledge of what's in it, because I've only had 5 minutes to peruse it, that doesn't make sense to me. So is there any way that we can get this earlier than 5 minutes before we had to vote on it?
You want to talk? Okay.
Go ahead.
You know what, we've always taken the path that we want to disclose as much as we can in this permanent long-standing record that gets filed with corporate registries. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword in that it takes time. And even when you look at having the number of corporations and having those, the equity pickups and those things to be included, this audit, and we worked diligently on it, was really just done early last week, and still had to be brought to provincial council before we came last week, and then had to get printed. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword. There's maybe ways that, you know, if people didn't want the amount of permanent disclosure that gets registered with the, you know, the Register of Alberta and Societies Act, there might be ways. But if we're going to continue and you know, where we are with, you know, 120 different grants or whatever it is we're running, it is a bit of a double-edged sword to get those two done within, you know.
What is our year end?
March 31st.
March 31st. So the auditor's report, I signed the auditor's report on, and it's in here, on August 2nd. So that was the date that the provincial council met to officially sign it off. And, you know, honestly, Aaron is absolutely right. And I'm independent from the Métis Nation. I think that's very important to know. So, but the amount of disclosure that is in this program, there's, you know, 109 schedules. And to get this done, it'd be almost impossible to get it done, approved through the approval process a month prior to this meeting. Apologize, but
Okay.
with it being a March year end, you know, to ensure, when you're dealing with $100 million of funding, it just takes a lot of stuff to ensure that I can do my job, that the accounting staff does their job, and then ultimately the oversight through the provincial council does theirs as well.
Okay, so I just quickly looked on that page 10 and I counted almost 19 corporations that we own.
Yep.
With 19 corporations that we own, why are we still getting 99% funding from the federal government and the provincial government? Are we not owning corporations that are actually turning a profit or bringing something back to the table? Like, why are we still so dependent on handouts? Why are we not more self-sufficient?
Yeah, and I can speak to that maybe in a little bit of a larger context. So the Métis Nation as a government and governments in general really have a few different ways that they can generate revenue. You know, one being taxation, one being royalties and stuff like that on natural resources, and one being transfers from other governments. And when we look at and we talk about our self-government and where we need to be, it's moving out of having to apply. You just imagine the administrative burden that goes into applying, reporting on all these different things to government, which most of those things, they're all great programs, but a lot of them aren't our priorities. Those are the priorities of the government that's giving us the funding. And so when it comes to, okay, you know, we want to talk about economic development as an engine to provide resources to the nation. Again, that's another argument that, you know, goes back years that people have is it the Métis Nation of Alberta at the head office's role to do business as a corporation to, you know, whatever it is that something better done at the local level? Is that something better done at the regional level? Or is that something that's better done by Métis entrepreneurs that, you know, for centuries have led commerce and trade in this country and that are out there needing to actually earn a living to put food on their table? And is that the space where the Métis Nation of Alberta needs to compete? So there's all those things. And the majority of the companies that you're seeing here are typically done to own an asset or reduce liability, or in a lot of cases to separate programs and services from you know, I guess the politics in a way. So you look at Apitogusin, for example, and Apitogusin has an independent board of directors, and albeit at times, and there has been people from provincial council that sit on those boards, but those boards and those decisions that Appy makes when it goes to lending are made on the merit of the Métis entrepreneur's business case. It's not made on a political decision by somebody that's looking to get reelected. And so that's another reason why we have these corporations, so that we can stop that. It doesn't happen at the M&A, but if you look broadly across, you know, in different Indigenous organizations in Canada, you can see very many examples where that was happen. And the way we've structured is to do the best we can so that can never happen, regardless of who's in leadership positions.
I'm just concerned and worried that we are so dependent on federal government and provincial government money that what happens if that dries up?
Yeah, and
where do we go from here?
Exactly, and you see cycles, you know, if you look back in history of you know, governments that are really progressive when it comes to things like, you know, child welfare or Indigenous rights, and you see some that aren't. And you know, when we had the previous Conservative government, for example, I was constantly in negotiations or trying to find ways to keep things alive, like our registry, where they said, you know what, your registry is a project and that project's over. And I said, well, that's not how the Métis Nation works. And so the stuff that you're talking about really gets into where we fit in Canada as a government and how we transition to our self-government and that we get those fiscal transfers. I know years ago we did a research on taxation and how much taxes Métis citizens in Alberta pay. And I believe, and this wasn't taking in GST, this wasn't taking in property tax, it was basically income tax. And this was when we, you know, I think this was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago when we did this, when our citizenship numbers were a lot lower. And we're looking at in excess of $500 million that Métis people are already paying in taxes. So you can look at that as, how does that really, again, work? You know, is it the right thing where these funds are just, you know, paid to government and Métis Nation gets nothing back? I'd argue no, that's not a right thing to do. But again, depending on the government in charge and whatever, it can change over time. And you'll see in the audit, one of even our disclosures is called the going concern. And one of the things that gets brought up typically in that area is, yeah, you guys rely on a lot of grants.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Shelley. And just for everyone's, for some people that may or may not know, this is Aaron Barner, he's the CEO?
Senior Executive Officer.
Thank you. So I have 4, 3, and 2, and then we'll call that so we can go to 4, 3 and 2, and then we'll call it a day on this report.
Thank you. Shelley Mandeville. I would like to sort of reiterate what the last comment made about not being able to see the information for a long enough period of time. I can appreciate that you all have a very big job to do. The auditor has to do their job, provincial council has to do their job, and then the information comes to us, and we, as members and citizens of Métis Nation, we have to do our job. So receiving them 5 minutes before they're presented to us doesn't give us enough time to articulate what our questions might be. So I mean, very quickly, I've come up with a couple of questions, but I really would have appreciated at least even receiving it first thing this morning at registration. 5 minutes before you're presenting it is not enough time for us to absorb it and try to understand what we're then asked to approve. So I have these 2 questions. I wouldn't mind if we could perhaps go back to that slide where there's the surpluses, if that's possible.
I don't have control of it,
Okay.
so I'll have to.
So, and maybe you can even answer the question without, without looking at it. But I wanted to know, are there restrictions on these surpluses? It's been commented that a lot of the money, well, the vast majority of the money does come from federal agreements. And so usually you either have to pay the money back or then you defer it. And I did see the slide where there were deferrals. And I'm just wondering, were those, if you defer in 1 year, are you then recognizing it in the following year? Because it doesn't seem to be like a rolling number of surpluses, and it's difficult to see and calculate what that is.
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing that happens is that when you have a deferral in a program in 1 year, yes, it comes into income in the next year, and either there's and there's a variety of reasons why funding is deferred. Sometimes the agreement is over 5 years. Sometimes the government comes in and does a contract on March 20th, 2022. Well, there's no time for the organization to spend the money, but they want to get it done. The federal government wants to get it done. One of your questions, so when you defer it from 1 year to the next year, it does come into income in the next year, okay? And there's a detailed summary of all the deferrals in here. Now, the surplus is an interesting one because there's an equity pickup, and maybe that goes back to, I'm sorry, I don't know that lady's name over there, but are there profits in the corporations? So for example, in the current fiscal year, there's an equity pickup from the earnings of Apitogason of $1.274 million. So the question, that's a very good question. Can that money be spent? Well, not really, because that's a surplus of that organization, okay? But it does, because the accounting rules say that that corporation has to abide by, in your consolidated financial statements, you have to do an equity pickup for the accounting for that organization. You pick up that profit in the current fiscal year. So you can't really tap into that and say, well, let's distribute that, because that is in the organization that is owned by the Métis Nation.
So what my concern, I guess, leads to is, are we going to reach a point where we have to give a bunch of money back? That's my concern. So maybe Aaron could.
Yeah, no. You know what? There's some times where there might be the odd smaller program where, you know, we might get the funding in the contract, and we'll take a look at it, and maybe something like $5,000, $10,000. You know, that we just won't do it. But by and large, you know, we do not send money back. This surplus goes into our retained earnings, and the equity pickup is obviously is separate from that, like Ruben said. But we're not going to be in a position where we are giving money back. And in fact, and I'll just give you an example on again why this is such a difficult process, being under the Societies Act and where we're at. So some of you, I know some of you because I've seen you there at Batoche, and you've seen Mark Miller, the Minister of Indigenous Services, come to Batoche, and he made an announcement about topping up housing funding. Well, he just did that for, you know, his own political reasons. But it's an interesting thing when you kind of know what goes on behind the scenes, because as a lot of you have known, I've talked to many of you this weekend, we haven't been able to open up our housing programs yet this year. And we've signed a 10-year accord with Canada. Why is that? We've done all of our reporting, we've sent in all of our budgets, everything's done. They're just really slow at sending the money over. And in a lot of these ones where you see the big deferrals, and even sometimes and why it's good to have a little bit of surplus every year is we'll carry these programs and we'll actually incur the expenses, and we sometimes don't get the money until, April or May. Early learning and childcare, if you look at that schedule, is an example of one where we don't get that money even in the fiscal year. So I'm very confident in sitting here and telling you we're not going to have to give any of this money back to the federal government.
Okay, so my second question is with respect to the travel slide that you just put in front of us. I noticed that there was quite a bit of travel in 2020 when we had pandemic restrictions, and then travel kind of dropped off, and even in this fiscal year that we're looking at, it's low in comparison. And so I'm trying to develop an idea in my head, like what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I think, just the slide's not up, but I think maybe it is actually exactly what you said. That travel that's being recorded was before COVID, and that the 2 years that it was lower, and including this last lower, was as a result of not being able to travel as much because of COVID. We were not traveling during COVID restrictions.
And you got to remember, the financial statements are on an April 1st to March 31st fiscal year of the organization. So COVID, when did the COVID restrictions and the travel restrictions start?
February 2020.
Well, I know
sure.
if some of you remember, there was a big, the last big event that the MNA participated in was in March of 2020 in Ottawa, the self-government conference, and then after that, it was completely stopped. So there was really only about 1 month in that year that wasn't. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What did I say? Number 3.
2, I think. Oh, no.
Well,
3,
there
2.
we go.
I went 3,
Thank
2,
you.
and then 3.
Ward Sutherland, Region 3. So this is more of a provincial council question. It's strange that your year ends in March, especially if you have your gatherings or AGM at this time, because it's going to be a time crunch issue. And it's very confusing when you're reading the financials, depending on, especially as a government in the future, should be the actual year that it's in. Has there been discussions of changing your reporting from January to December?
Sure, yeah, there definitely has. So our March 31st deadline is in line with the federal government's year end, which is our major funder. And if you look at 99% of our contracts and contributions, they run from April 1st to March 31st. Yeah. So it would just be an absolute reporting nightmare if we changed our year end to December 31st, because it wouldn't align up with any of our funding. And you'll see a lot of times, and it's one of these last legacy things as we move into our self-government, is that a lot of times we don't even get the funding, until February, March in a lot of years, and we're pretty damn busy at that time to make sure that we've met all our obligations, so we don't have to give any money back.
Okay, could you do a shadow on your, I mean, when you're looking at your statements here anyways, your deferrals are $88 million anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you did a shadow kind of budget, you had your yearly, you could still have your shadow on your funding.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right? So you just separate the two.
Yeah.
Then you have more accuracy on expenses and comparables, that kind of stuff. The one thing, I didn't have much time to look at it, so excuse, it might be in here, but I'm going to ask the question is, the one thing I didn't see is any type of reporting as a risk assessment. Is that a normal part of the audit, or identifying any risk assessments?
Well, that's part of the procedures that I do.
Yeah.
So one of the things that our firm does is prior to going in, there's certain guidelines and principles that we follow to ensure that, and we look at risk. We look at risk to the organization. We look at fraud risk. In fact, at the Provincial Council, that's one of the things I talk to the council about as well, is fraud risk. We talk about all sorts of risks. And so, yeah, we
Yeah,
go through
sorry,
a lot.
sorry to cut you off, I'm asking in the report, is there anything that actually says, we've done a risk assessment and we viewed it, it's this percentage, or there's not to be concerned? Because I haven't had time to read it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Probably, and I got to remember, I'm an accountant, I'm an auditor.
Yeah.
To me, my favorite part of this is the independent auditor's report, okay? And this is the only thing that belongs to me. And this would be on page just after the index, okay? And so this goes through and it talks about my opinion on the organization, the basis for the opinion, responsibilities of management and those charged with governance for the financial statements, you know, our responsibilities as auditors, and then it talks about a lot of the what generally accounted auditing standards are. It goes through, and this report is a standard report that's developed with the CPA Alberta and CPA Canada, and you know, I love it because the whole idea is to provide more insight to the users of what we actually do as auditors. And so, you know, I think that that's a very important part of the financial statements. It's 2 pages. It's the only thing that's signed by me. And, you know, basically when I go through it, there's 3 things that I can do as an auditor. I can go through and when I go through and ultimately the goal is when I'm going through and auditing financial statements, I'm going to go through and develop, if I'm comfortable with the financial statements, and you can read through my opinion, and go through the procedures to ensure that the financial statements are not materially misstated. And so one of the things that we do is we do all sorts of different procedures, you know, as a part of it, because ultimately I'm on the hook for that. You know, as an independent auditor, I'm on the hook for saying, yes, these financial statements, this is a clean auditor's report. And so we look at risk, we do all sorts of things. We confirm revenue, we confirm, have discussions with the lawyers that are involved with the Matey Nation, independent confirmations. We do discussions with those charged with governance in the organization. And we do a lot of testing as well. So there's a lot that we do in order to develop our opinion on the financial statements.
So I'm assuming all the subsidiary corporations are doing their own audits, and then you're seeing the results of their audits?
Yeah, well, we do the most of them, okay? The only one we don't do is Appy Togason. We're not the auditor for that one. And I'm in constant communication with the auditor for that organization. And there's standard procedures that we have, standard letters that have been developed by the CPA Alberta, where I say I'm relying on them, and they send letters back as well. So there's standard procedures that we do to ensure that the financial statements are not materially misstated.
Okay, thank you. Last question, and I think it was mostly answered.
Okay.
So on the deferred contributions, the biggest chunk is actually 41.
Ward,
yeah.
So I've got 3 more people to go.
Yeah.
And I've got 15 minutes to go.
Oh, sorry. Last question.
No, I'm
it's
just
fast.
saying, you know what, I laugh because we said to people, you have 1 chance to come up, so I noticed you have like 10 questions.
Yeah,
And
well,
it's
we're only allowed
okay
1
then.
question. Okay.
Pardon me, so.
So real quick,
Yep.
just the reserved contributions, because the biggest chunk is housing at 41 million. Am I assuming the money is in the bank, or this is a contract beside and you're waiting for the money? How would we know the difference?
Sure, I can explain that. A few years back, we were able to negotiate a lump sum settlement for past grievances with CMHC in the chronic underfunding of our housing program. And so we're in the process right now of actually developing a trust. You know, it was fine and dandy, I think, for time for us to have it and keep it on the balance sheet and in there, but you know, there's been some messaging, I guess you could say, from folks that fund us through Alberta Seniors in Housing, that they want us to, instead of using that for our reserve for long-term to be there permanently, that they want us to start using that for operations, even though that settlement had nothing to do with Alberta Seniors. It was done federally, not provincially. So we're just in the process of actually setting up a housing trust so that it stays there safe forever.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2.
So just for clarity, Brian, they said on the thing that we could come up here twice.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
that's what I was saying. So I noticed when somebody comes up, they're like, okay, I might as well ask my many questions I can when I come up. I would.
So, Ruben, just from my previous question, I think that it's important that our council discloses all remuneration. I'm the president of the National Métis Women. I fully disclose and put online on our website how much, that you can see exactly what my salary is, and I can, and so can my auditor, assure I receive absolutely no other remuneration for the work that I do. So I think that as elected officials who are accountable, that's very important to be transparent. So, and being you're the auditor, I think that you should help make sure that that transparency is reflected in next year's audit. But I'm going to talk, I am impressed with that, how quick you guys do an audit. I don't have anywhere near the millions of dollars that you do, and I know I just got my draft audit yesterday to review and to take to the board. So it's an amazing job that you're doing. I take my hat off to you for that,
Thank you.
because this is a lot of money. The question I have, though, is a political one, and maybe Aaron can help us. It's on page 70. And I am hoping that we never have to go back to the COVID reality that we had. But on page 70, Schedule 43, it identifies that Region 1 received $1.2+ million to do things like support the elders and vulnerable community members, measures to address food insecurity, education and other supports for children, mental health, blah, blah, blah. We all needed that in our region. So I'm wondering why Region 1 was so special and the rest of us, some of us with much bigger populations, got nothing.
Sure, yeah, and actually, Melanie, that's a great question, and there's an explanation. So, as you know, Melanie, but maybe not everybody knows, there's things called eligible funding recipients that are all shrouded in federal red tape. And what Region 1 did, and I think there's a couple other regions and locals in here, was they applied for funding on their own through these different COVID pots. They were successful in getting the funding, except for the fact that the federal government doesn't have the authority to do a contribution agreement with them. They only have those funding authorities, and the M&A is the only eligible funding recipient. So we just simply took the contract, and we have to, of course, disclose it, but all the funding went to the region because of the work they did to apply for the grant that they got. Yeah.
Thank you, Mel. I'm going to 1, and then I'll go to 4, and you guys, I'll need to close it, even though I said I would, but people walked up, and so here you are. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Garrett Tomlinson, Region 6. I just want to make a comment. My understanding, Mr. Chair, is these financials are historical in nature. You know, this is the record of the business we've done, so to ask for them in advance to line by line, this doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got this for the entire year. Go through them, and these staff members here can answer questions going forward, but there's nothing we could say here today that's going to change the numbers here, because this is what's been done. The auditors agree that this was what's been done, and it's been recorded fairly. Really, that's all we're being asked to accept here today. And even if we don't, it doesn't change what's in here. So let's just get on with the business and finish this.
Thank you. That was Gary, I think. Number 4, please.
Thank you, Brian. Brenda Burke, Strategic, Region 1. Ruben, I'm just wondering, on page 27, you have provincial council members receive a stipend in lieu of ministerial portfolios. Is that part of the total salary, or is that stipend not included in that?
Page 27 here. You know what? I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head.
My understanding, it isn't.
Yeah.
Because my understanding is they get an extra $20,000 because they don't, or because they haven't been assigned portfolios. So, and I'm just looking because regional council assigns or approves the wages, the salaries. So I don't think it does.
I don't want to answer wrong. So what I'll do is, if it's okay with you, is I'll go back and confirm it. If you want to send me your
Sure.
question, then I can confirm it and get back to you.
And
if that's
just
okay.
on Mel's question about remuneration, but clarify something for me. If you receive a salary and you attend meetings, whatever position you have, if you go to a health meeting, if I'm a vice president, I go to a health meeting, my understanding is that you would not get honorarium. So are we saying, or Mel, are you saying they are getting, in addition to a salary, honorarium? I wasn't sure what.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you they're not getting an honorarium from the Métis Nation of Alberta. And it's not processed through our finance department. And if they're going to, if someone's going to a meeting and it's the City of Calgary Boys and Girls Club and they get a honorarium from the Boys and Girls Club, we would have no way of knowing that.
But what if it's within the Métis Nation affiliates?
Again, I don't believe that to be the case, but we'd have to double check. But I don't believe that to be the case at all.
Thanks,
Again, we
Aaron.
can check into that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
My last question, Ruben, is does the Métis Nation of Alberta have any joint ventures?
Joint ventures. Well, you know, there is one joint venture as of right now that is out at Matey Crossing. That one's just started. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but that was in, I believe, do you remember the name of it? It's for the buffalo.
It's the Bison Farm stuff.
The Bison Farm stuff.
But it's not part of this yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask for a motion. I'm guessing that's what you're doing there, number two?
Nope, I'm making a point, if I may.
Oh, you're making a point?
Please.
Make a point. And then make a motion, please, because I'm trying to say we've got to get out of here. Apparently, we're told we have to get out of here.
I can't confidently make a motion. I'm the treasurer for Region 3 as well.
All right.
I haven't seen an audited financial statement since, I'm not sure, it's been a long time. And so my point to the auditor would be, in coming out with these consolidated financials, we're hearing that, you know, these statements are prepared and we're in the loop on it. Not really. And the regional treasurer and I have not seen a financial statement for over a year that's audited. That's actually in our bylaws. Hopefully we don't lose that going into a constitution. But I'm just wondering from the auditor, if you've looked to see if approved financial statements have been received from each of the regions that were voted on by regional council. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, I have not been engaged to do that. The only audit work that I've been engaged to do is with the core funding from the federal government, provincial government, sorry, for $169,000 for each region. So I'm not the auditor on record for Region 3. Sorry, I'm not sure who is, but no.
Thank you. Mel, number 3, Mel, I'm guessing you're going to address a motion.
I move to accept the finance report for 2021-22.
Thank you, Mel. Are you going to second it? That's. Please turn number 1 on.
Mayor Tomlinson, Region 6, I second that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say that we had plenty of questions, I'm just going to basically ask people to decide on this financial report. So all in favor of the report, please raise your hands. All those opposed, raise your hands. Seeing no opposition, any absence, whatever they're called. Nobody wants to participate. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to make a quick comment before we leave. Some of you guys know Ryan from finance, but his name's Ryan Fleming. He's been with the Métis Nation for probably close to 15 years. He leads our finance team, and you know, that's his job. But I just wanted to take a moment in front of everybody to just recognize Ryan If there's ever something that needs to be organized, like a golf tournament or Native Provincial Hockey or anything, he's always there for all the youth, all the seniors, the benevolent fund, all that stuff, and it's not anything that, you know, is part of what his normal day-to-day duties are, but he's always been there for us. So if you guys could just give Ryan a big round of applause, please.
So Bruce takes over from here.
Okay, guys, just one quick thing now. We're almost done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for your benevolence again so that we can finish this agenda off today. We just have the resolutions to deal with. So I'm going to ask the resolution committee to come up here, Terry Antonello, and then once that's done, we can do the closing ceremony and the adjournment. And then tonight, you have the free banquet. Tomorrow, you can sleep in, take a leisurely drive home. So if you could just bear with me for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Thank you so much. So if we could get the resolution committee up here, please. Yeah, and so we're going to have some folks that abstained from the, Joanne, she has a list of the folks that abstained from that last vote on the finances. So if you could just include that, they were missed when Brian was looking for the call. Okay, so we have the resolutions committee up here with Chantal Sparkling Eyes from Region 1, Violet LaPratte from Region 2, Richard Pichet from Region 3, Sharon Morin from Region 4, Shane Combs from Region 5, and Pat Brothers from Region 6. Yes. All of them right now. Ordinary and special resolutions as well, all at this time. Okay, so do you guys usually, from amongst yourselves, you select a chairman or somebody to speak on your behalf? And so I'll turn it over to whoever's been selected for that position. And you are?
Do you read this or do I?
What's that?
Do you read this part or do I?
I don't think, I'm not sure you just have to read it. I think you just have to let us know, like, so the role of the Special Resolutions Committee historically has been to review the special resolutions to make a determination if it's a special resolution, and if so, then it's live or able to become moved and live on the floor. They don't really deal with the ordinary resolutions because those just actually come from the floor, for anybody can make a motion or a resolution. So we're gonna look to their spokesperson. That spokesperson is going to tell us about their meeting, what they sat down to review, and they're going to give us basically the summation of their decision. So, ma'am?
Okay, my name's Chantal Sparkling Eyes. I'm from Region 1, and I was appointed chair to discuss our meeting. So this morning we got together and went through the special resolution that was put forward with the lawyer. And we decided as a collective that this is not something that we can move forward on. This is something that the Matey Judiciary Council has already dealt with. And as it's stated in our bylaws, they have the final decision-making, and so it is not our position where we can undermine that authority.
So basically, I believe what they're saying is that there are no special resolutions to deal with. They've made a determination that that resolution submitted does not qualify as a special resolution, and for the reasons that she presented. So basically, there's really nothing more to do with that other than the ordinary resolutions. So I'm going to dismiss the Resolutions Committee, and we're going to continue on with the agenda and see if there are any ordinary resolutions to be presented. And if there are, could you present them right away, and then we'll move on with the rest of the meeting. Mic number 1.
Thank you. Krista Letty, Region 4. Whereas Métis artisans, artists, and makers have historically been entrepreneurs using unique skill sets to create art and items that reflected culture, and through trade and sale allowed Métis families to thrive. And contemporarily, Métis artists, artisans, and makers often struggle to get their products to mainstream markets or pass along the skills that have been passed to them through generations. And new generations who wish to learn these skills often do not have access to Métis instructors or mentors, leading to a loss of culture, tradition, and identity. Therefore, be it resolved, the MNA create a Métis Artists Collective that supports Métis artists, artisans, and makers through platforms and programs where artists, artisans, and makers may bring their goods to mainstream and community markets, have opportunities to expand their skills, visions, and reach, and connect the Métis community with goods and services that reflect Métis culture and identity. Therefore, be it also resolved that this artist collective and the M&A provide opportunities to those who wish to learn the skills involved in traditional and contemporary arts and craftsmanship, ensuring the stories, culture, and identity around Métis arts and craftsmanship follow through to future generations. Therefore, be it further resolved that the Métis Nation will plan and host a Métis Arts, Artisans, and Makers Fair by no later than December 17th, 2022.
Okay, there you have a motion presented on the floor. Could we bring those motions up and the paper copies and give them to the recording secretary for her, so she can keep them? Okay, so do we have a seconder on that?
Hi, my name is Laura Letty, Region 4, and I second that motion.
Perfect. Okay, guys, we have a live motion on the floor right now to support the artisans. They're not only calling for that support, but they're calling for a meeting be convened, a group gathering before December of 2022. So is there any discussion on that? If not, do I hear question? Questions called. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Woohoo! Supporting the artisans. Passed. Okay, so I haven't been really keeping track here. I'm going to go to mic number 3.
Thank you very much. Audrey Petra, Region 2. I have to stop and think. Whereas the Métis Nation of Alberta continues to have significant concerns about the trial judge's conclusions in R.V. Hirschkorn in 2010, which were subsequently upheld by the appeal courts in Alberta. And whereas since 2010, additional research regarding Métis presence and harvesting in southern Alberta has been undertaken, and recent decisions of the Supreme Court of Canada and other appellant courts have contradicted the narrow site-specific approach to Métis harvesting rights taken in R.V. Hirschkorn. And whereas the M&A continues to emphatically reject the position that Métis do not have any harvesting rights protected by Section 35 of the Constitution Act anywhere in southern Alberta. And whereas, despite the Government of Alberta's committing to discussions with the M&A on Métis harvesting rights, including an express commitment in the 2010 Métis Nation of Alberta Government of Alberta Métis Harvesting Agreement to discuss the recognition of Métis harvesting rights in southern Alberta, the current provincial government refuses to engage with the M&A on this issue. Now, therefore, the 94th Métis Nation of Alberta Annual General Assembly resolves that A, the M&A President write to the relevant Alberta ministers to once again request a meeting to discuss the recognition of Métis harvesting rights in southern Alberta consistent with previous commitments. B, the M&A convene a conference to be held somewhere in southern Alberta that brings together M&A Region 3, including M&A citizens who ancestrally connect to southern Alberta, as well as historians, experts, and lawyers, to better understand the history of the Métis throughout southern Alberta as an indivisible part of the Métis Nation within Alberta. C, the M&A work with M&A Region 3 to develop a public and government education campaign on Métis rights in southern Alberta, including raising this issue in the ongoing UCP leadership race. And D, if Alberta continues to refuse to discuss Métis harvesting rights in southern Alberta, the M&A initiate litigation in consultation with M&A Region 3 Regional Council and local councils to secure a recognition of Métis harvesting rights in southern Alberta. I so move.
Do we have a seconder?
Cindy Lemley
Dusty
from District 3 want to second that motion.
Number 2, what was your name again, ma'am?
Cindy Lemley.
Yeah. Okay, we have a mover, seconder, any discussion? Basically, it's a motion to look for some policy direction so the M&A can move forward on pieces of the harvesting and the Hirschkorn piece. If there's no more discussion, do I hear a question? Oh, number 1?
Yeah.
Mike, number 1, you had some comments?
Wally Garrick, Medicine Hat.
I am proud cousin of Gary Hirschhorn. And he went through a lot of crap during that trial. And, you know, he kind of felt left out afterwards. And he was pretty disappointed in the outcome. So just wanted to mention him. And don't forget him. Don't forget about him sometimes. You know, if you ever get a chance to see him, thank him for what he did. He was a lone survivor in that trial. One, you know what happened to him. One guy unfortunately pulled out because he had so much stress, and the other guy committed suicide. Gary was left on his own to fight that, and you know, I think he'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and definitely Mr. Hirschhorn appreciate it. Okay, do I hear question? Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion's passed. Mic number 2.
Hello, my name's Hannah Nash, and I'm a youth from Region 4, and I'm bringing forward 2 resolutions today. So the first one is, whereas the Métis Nation of Alberta is the representative of all Métis citizens within Alberta, and whereas the 2S LGBTQ+ community has historically been underrepresented within the political and social structure of the MNA, and whereas members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community face higher rates of violence and discrimination, both historically and contemporarily, and whereas the MNA strives to advocate for inclusivity and fairness for all citizens, and whereas the MNA is working towards self-governance and the inclusion of Métis people from a diversity of backgrounds and experiences, it is critical to the future of our nation, culture, and people, and therefore be it resolved that the MNA take every reasonable effort to be inclusive to the 2S LGBTQ+ community in all of the work that is being done within the Métis Nation of Alberta's program services and political body.
Okay, before I call for a seconder, I just wanted to make a note for the last motion that it was unanimous. So for the record, if we could have it that it was unanimous. Do we have a seconder for the motion? You, ma'am, can you identify yourself?
Yes, Rebecca Lavely. I'm Region 3 Youth, and I second this motion.
Perfect. Is there any discussion on that? Mic number 3.
Melanie, Omanheo Region 4. As the national president for Métis Women, we leave space for our 2S LGBT community, Métis community, who often are underrepresented and actually extremely oppressed. So I actually applaud these young people coming here and bringing forward this resolution, and I hope everybody can support it.
Okay, dokie. Any other discussion? If not?
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Another motion carried unanimously. Are there any other motions that are resolutions that if people would like to bring forward? You have another one?
Yep.
Mic number 2.
Alrighty. So, do I have to say who I am again?
Please.
Okay, my name is Hannah Nash, and I'm a youth from Region 4. Okay, so this one we kind of talked about yesterday when I came up and I spoke about the Constitution. Essentially, what we're looking for is youth representation in all aspects of our Constitution and all of our departments of the Métis Nation within Alberta and what we're developing. So, whereas the Métis Nation has fought for centuries for our inherent right to self-government and self-determination, and whereas the Métis Nation of Alberta has developed a draft constitution that will move the Métis Nation of Alberta out of the Societies Act and provide a solid foundation for our Métis government for generations to come, whereas there will be a transition committee to aid the Métis Nation of Alberta in the successful transition from the Societies Act to self-government, and whereas the implementation of the Métis Nation of Alberta's Constitution will have immense impact on all Métis Nation of Alberta citizens for generations to come, and whereas the generations, Métis family, and communities within Alberta have organized, advocated, and advanced the goal of Métis Nation self-determination and self-government, and Métis youth must be meaningfully involved and included in the governance of the nation in order to ensure this legacy is not lost. And whereas Métis Nation of Alberta youth citizens must be involved in every aspect of this nation, including but not limited to the transition from our current bylaws to our ratified MNA Métis Constitution. Therefore, be it resolved that the Métis Nation of Alberta's Constitution Transition Committee will include 2 youth between the ages of 18 and 29 who will be unanimously appointed by the M&A Provisional Youth Council.
There you go. Kids want to be involved. Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion?
Rebecca Lavely, Region 3 Youth, and I second that motion.
Perfect. Is there any discussion?
Sorry,
Mike number 4.
Hello, I'm Dusty Gaucher. I used to sit on this youth council, and as far as we've come doing this stuff, when you guys make your committees for a lot of these things, we always forget. We're forgotten about. As you can see, we're youth. We're not forgotten. We're here to do the next step after our elders are gone and the M&A is left in our hands. I'm in support of this motion. And you guys are not the Provisional Youth Council. You guys are the Youth Council. You guys are our next leaders, and you guys need to remove the provisional from your name now, because the provisional was what Mitch and them and us helped start. But you guys are in that position now. You guys are the Youth Council. So I applaud you guys for what you guys do, and I hope everybody has a good night, and hi.
Perfect. We're almost done now, guys. Did you have comments? No? Okay. Do I hear a question? Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Abstentions? Motion's carried. There we go. Mic number 1.
I have a motion to bring to the floor.
Can you deliver your motions to the...
Yes. Whereas following Canada's colonial expansion westward into the Métis Nation homeland, the federal government issued scrip that acknowledged the Métis Nation's pre-existing rights to land and purported to extinguish the Indian title of the Métis. And whereas the Métis scrip system created by the federal government was rife with fraud and abuse, which led Métis across the homeland to be dispossessed of their lands and resources. And whereas in response to the injustice of scrip, Métis resisted, organized, petitioned, and litigated to seek redress and secure their rights and land, but Canada amended its own laws to stop Métis from pursuing claims against scrip speculators and ignored the injustice the system created. And whereas the redress for the injustices of the Métis scrip system is fundamental to meaningful reconciliation between the Crown and the Métis Nation with Alberta, and all Métis whose ancestors were subject to Métis scrip must benefit from any negotiated settlement. And whereas the Supreme Court of Canada has acknowledged the history of scrip speculation and devaluation is a sorry chapter in our nation's history, and whereas on November 16, 2017, Canada and the MNAs signed the Framework Agreement for Advancing Reconciliation, which includes a commitment to explore with a view to settling the outstanding claims of the Métis Nation within Alberta against the federal Crown, including but not limited to claims relating to Métis scrip issued pursuant to the Dominion Lands Act. And whereas, despite the MNA's persistent efforts, Canada has failed to establish a substantive process to address Métis scrip or negotiate on this issue, and whereas the MNA organized at provincial, regional, and local level to challenge litigation related to Métis scrip, initiated by a few unauthorized individuals and so-called community associations, DeRoche and Canada, and in response, all Alberta-based plaintiffs abandoned their claims in this litigation. Now, therefore, the 94th Métis Nation of Alberta Annual General Assembly resolves that A, the MNA demand that Canada immediately establish a formal process to negotiate a settlement in relation to Métis scrip for the Métis Nation within Alberta, consistent with the Framework Agreement for Advancing Reconciliation of November 16, 2017. B, the MNA consults with citizens, regional councils, and local councils from across the province to provide information and garner support for efforts to secure redress for the injustices of the Métis scrip system, and C, if no meaningful progress is made with Canada to establish a process to negotiate a settlement in relation to Métis scrip, the MNA initiate litigation on behalf of the Métis Nation within Alberta as a whole to secure a negotiations process and redress for the injustices of the Métis scrip against the Métis Nation within Alberta.
Do we have a seconder?
Paul Bursey, Region 3. I second the motion.
Perfect. Is there any discussion? If not, basically it's a motion to redress the script issue for the Métis Nation of Alberta and provides a few recommendations on a way to get there. So, do I hear a question? Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion's carried. Woohoo! We're done. We're done. Okay, we've reached the end of our session here, so if I could get Madame Patras up here for the closing ceremonies. Pardon me? Yep. Yep. So that was unanimous as well, if we could. And just to let you know, because we've gone over a little bit, the dinner's actually going to start at 6 now. Instead of, I think it was 5:30, they're going to, once we clear out, they'll clean up and put the banquet here together. So Madame Patras is up here. She's going to do the closing ceremony. So I'm Bruce Gladue. I really appreciate my nominator and my seconder. This is a wonderful job. I really appreciate it. I know we get a lot of Philadelphia lawyers here, but hey, man, that's what the job is all about. We're all Philadelphia lawyers at some point, right? For yourselves, I pray that you have a safe trip home. And God bless that we see you here again at the AGA next year. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair for his final words.
Final words. What's the final? What shall I say? It was a great day, good motion, emotions, and so I think we do what Métis people do is we debate and we argue and we get her done, and we got her done. So that's what I will say. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, let's say thank you to Bruce and Brian. Thank you very much for doing a good job. Good afternoon again. I just want to take an opportunity to thank you all for being here, for staying, for dealing with some very, very difficult issues. We've got some very good resolutions going forward. We know that for me in Region 3, we've had a lot of discussions about what hasn't happened around harvesting, so I'm glad that we have that resolution. We will be able to move on it. All of the resolutions that I believe we passed today can really start moving us forward. So I just want to say I hope everybody has a very good evening, enjoy the banquet, and travel safe when you go home tomorrow. Thank you very much. I think we have an elder that's going to say a closing prayer for us. Joanne went to find her. Oh, okay. I'm not even sure what we ended up for a final number for citizens today, but I think it looked pretty full, and I'm sure we will get that. I know we started out at 9 o'clock with 409, and it looked to me like there was more coming, so where's Maggie gone now? Where's Maggie gone now? Okay. Did you find them? No? Oh, she's volunteering Doreen. I think we were supposed to have someone else that was going to close, but that's okay, Doreen. We appreciate you coming up and doing our closing prayer for us. Or Doreen, did you want to just go to a mic down there instead of coming all the way up? That's okay too.
What a wonderful day. That's how action happens. Heavenly Father, as we come to the end of our time together, we thank you for what has been accomplished here today. May the matters discussed serve as a catalyst to move us forward and cause us to advance and see processes in place for our Métis families, citizens, and community. May we leave here recognizing you are the God of all wisdom and you are willing to lead us forward. God bless, keep safe, and safe travels.
Thank you very much, Doreen. And everyone remember, Dinner has now been extended to 6 p.m. instead of 5:30. And also, next year's assembly will be at Matey Crossing. According to our bylaws, every second year is at Matey Crossing. So that's where it'll happen next year. Thank you very much. Enjoy.